what's the problem with JC? Because he's not the right guy. Because he's no way, shape, or form has any of the qualifications of Moshiach. How do we know what the qualifications are? Well, Maimonides, who codified all of Jewish law, is actually the only codifier who codifies Moshiach, meaning Maimonides is not the only codifier of Jewish law, but he's the most thorough codifier, because he codified all the laws, including the laws that were not relevant to the time of exile. While the other codifiers, there were two other codifiers also in his rough time frame, as we once learned, the Rosh and the Rif, as well as Maimonides, but they didn't touch on any of the laws that have to do with the Messianic era. But Maimonides codifies everything. So he lists the qualifications of Mashiach, and JC doesn't fit any of them. He wasn't particularly religious. He didn't return the Jews to God. He's not a direct descendant of Solomon, the son of David. We don't know his ancestry at all, actually. The last week, I was very inspired by the energy of the weeks, which I know is a very passionate Mashiach energy. Just answer your questions on Mashiach, and I felt it was such a special class. We're going to do it one more time. We're going to try again for people to share their questions, things they wonder. It's one of the most essential topics in Judaism. As we said, it's the last two of the principles, cardinal principles of our faith that Maimonides structured is belief in Mashiach, belief in the redemption, belief in the Redeemer. And Maimonides actually writes in the laws about Mashiach that someone who does not believe in Mashiach or someone does not await his coming is an apostate, is someone who's denying God's Torah. You can say, no, I'm not denying Torah. I'm just doubting Mashiach. No such thing. If you doubt Mashiach, you uprooted this most cardinal foundation of all of Torah, because all of Torah is founded on a premise that there's a point, that God did all this for a reason, that we're working toward a goal. And the goal is that God wants a home in the lowest realm. This is the lowest realm. Why do we call this the lowest realm? Because here, God could almost not be apparent, but if you search for him, you could find him. So what could be lower than this, where he's not apparent at all, where he's completely hidden and there's no possibility of finding him? If that was true, then there'd be no point in such a world. A world where God cannot be found is, a world that has no purpose. So this is clearly the lowest it can get, where God is hidden, where I find him only with searching and believing and effort. This is the lowest it gets. And in this lowest realm, we are told 4 different times in the Midrash, God wants a home. What is a home? A permanent revelation of his essence and being. So this is foundational. And if you don't believe in this, everything is built on a structure that crumbled. So it's all, in essence, false, because you're missing the whole foundation. As we said, the very second verse of all the scriptures is the Spirit of God hovering over the waters, when that's all the world is water. And Sage says, what is that Spirit of God? This is the Spirit of Mashiach. This is the Spirit of the Messiah, of the Redeemer. So at the very beginning, because we say the beginning and the ends are wedged in each other. So the beginning, when all there is a world of water, is the Spirit of God, is the Spirit of Mashiach, is the Spirit of the Redeemer. And that's the bottom line that we begin with and we come to as the conclusion of all of the work of thousands of years since creation, right? 5,785 years, all coming to that point that we hope and pray and believe is happening right now, that all the work done since the beginning of the time is validated, comes to its purpose, comes to its fruition, the crescendo, the climax, the complete revelation of Mashiach now, which was the purpose and point of it all. So what are your questions? Because that's what this class is going to be about. And maybe before we even get to that, as I said to you, I had my 2 personal celebrations a week ago, a granddaughter being born, Saturday night, a grandson being born, so basically 2 grandchildren in 1 week. I mean, my gosh, what wealth, what absolute bounty. And we're told that every child that's born, every Jewish child that's born, is another step in bringing the redemption as that additional light is brought into the world. So we're 2 steps closer because I had 2 grandchildren over this past week. What can I answer from your end?
Is Mashiach for everyone?
Yes. It says that clearly in many of the prophecies. In Tzfanya, it says, it's a long verse that's quoted, and I can't remember it by heart. It says, at that time, Lo yarei lo yashchisu b'chol har kadshi, they will not do any evil or corruption in all of my holy mountain. They will all speak in one language, in one clear language, and they will all serve as one portion together. So that was a very mangled rendition of that verse. My apologies. But the point of the verse is that all of the world will be serving God. All of the world will experience redemption. In the Tanya, even, Alter Rebbe discusses this at one point when he's speaking about the redemption. Towards the end of the chapter, he brings 4 quotations showing that the nations of the world will be affected by this. And it says, they're going to be in the cracks and the crevices of the mountains, which seemingly doesn't sound like a positive thing. It sounds like they're shivering in terror because now is the great day of judgment, and boy, did they mess up. But the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, that's not how he explains it. He explains it that the going into the cracks and the crevices of the mountains is because they're in such awe. It's an expression of their absolute nullification to God. And he explains that from all the godliness that will come to the Jewish people during the era of redemption, it will spill over, like the cup runneth over. It will spill over to all the nations of the world. And that's why all the nations of the world will be in a state of absolute nullification to God. And the entire world, as Isaiah says in several places, the world will be full of knowledge of God as the waters cover the sea. The whole world. Because the whole world will only want to find out more, to connect more, to learn more, to get closer and closer to God. The Jews will be in Israel. The nations will still live in Chicago and Colorado and all the world. But they will come. It says very clearly, they will come to Jerusalem, connect to God, to learn about God, to study God, to get closer to God. So the entire world will experience redemption. And in the beginning of this process, one of the first things that God will do is remove evil. It says, the spirit of impurity, I, God, will remove from the world. So the evil will be gone from all of us. We will not be cookie cutter images of each other. We'll all be different, as all of our godliness could appear different, but our evil will be gone. So often we define ourselves by our problem, by our lacks, by our insecurities, by our traumas, by what we don't have. All that will be gone. So who am I when all that is gone? Who I am, whoever human being is a godly being. And now I get to find out about myself and see my godly strengths. And each person will be their own individual person with their godliness shining. Next question.
What is our role in helping to bring Mashiach?
I think the non-Jews have a critical role in bringing Moshiach. And I think, my personal opinion, I want to clarify, what I said until now was not my personal opinion. I was quoting or trying to quote verses throughout the prophets. There's so much about redemption and so much that speaks about the non-Jews, how they will be part of this beautiful vision of the entire world embracing and being embraced by God. In terms of bringing Mashiach, I think it's very interesting because in the 80s, Lubavitcher Rebbe focused on 2 campaigns. One, bringing Mashiach, bringing the redemption, and the other was teaching the world the laws of Noah. And you saw throughout the 80s the intensification of both campaigns. And I feel they're parallel campaigns because, as I said, as it says in the Midrash, that God created this world because he wants a dwelling place in the lowest realm. He wants to live on planet Earth. Live? What does it mean live? God is everywhere. God is here. This is God's energy. If it wasn't, it wouldn't be. So God's already here. What does he want? He wants a permanent, will not change, revelation, expression, what we could all see, of his essence and being. How does he get that permanent revelation of essence? By the world accepting him. The world accepting God, the world accepting Moshiach. Now, who is the world? As I understand it, non-Jews are far more the world than Jews. I mean, we're quasi-world. We think we're world. But really, we're a little bit players. Because we're Jews. We're really different. In a certain way, we're very similar. In a certain way, we're completely a different species. So the 8 billion of mankind, that's the world. Now, it doesn't mean that when a Jew believes in Mashiach and accepts Mashiach and believes in the Redeemer and accepts the Redeemer, well, that's irrelevant. No, I don't mean that. But I do feel that when a Noahide does, when a non-Jew believes in Mashiach, accepts Mashiach, believes in the Redeemer, accepts the Redeemer, it's even more powerful because they're literally world in a way even more than a Jew is. So I believe every non-Jew has a critical role, the same critical role I have, but I think the non-Jew's role is a little more important, of believing in redemption, accepting redemption, believing the Redeemer, accepting the Redeemer. The Baba Rebbe said this Torah portion, meaning yesterday's Torah portion, now we're Sunday, so a little more than 24 hours ago, as was read in the synagogues, portion of Chai Sarah. And the Baba Rebbe explains all of the work of the entire worldwide network of emissaries of Chabad was completed. And the only thing remaining is to accept Mashiach in order that he can redeem the world. Now, when I read those words for the first time, when I learned those words, these words were said in 1992.
Wow.
Or maybe 1991, the fall. It was like this time of year. So depending on how the Hebrew and English calendar came out, it was probably the end of 91, probably sometime in November of 91. I was so taken by those words. I was so shocked. What does the Rebbe mean that the work is done? I could look around the world. I could see, obviously billions of non-Jews that are totally clueless of God, and millions of Jews that are totally clueless. There's billions of non-Jews and millions of Jews because there's a lot more non-Jews than Jews. We're talking about 8 billion non-Jews and 15 million Jews. And a high percentage of non-Jews and many, many, many Jews seemingly don't know anything about God. I don't know. How many Jews serve God from the 15 million? I don't know. 3 million? Maybe? I don't know the number. I've searched to find it because I like numbers, but I couldn't ever get complete clarity, but I think about 3 million. 3 million. And Lubavitcher Rebbe is sitting in Brooklyn and saying all the work is done. So clearly he didn't mean that he thinks every Jew in the world keeps Shabbos and keeps kosher and all of 8 billion mankind are Noahides. What he meant was enough of the work that was needed to create redemption was done. And there's one thing left that you need to do to make it happen. And that one thing is to accept Mashiach. Kabel Mashiach Tzidkenu b'poyel mamish, to accept the righteous Mashiach, Redeemer, in actuality, so he can do his mission, and to bring the Jews out of exile. So the Rebbe is saying, enough was done, that this is all we need to do. Now, that was the Rebbe's message, obviously speaking at this point primarily to the Jewish people, but also to the world. But it was interesting because at the same time of year, there's a lot of focus on the Rebbe and on Mashiach, and CNN came by the Rebbe. They waited in line, I guess, I'm assuming, or maybe they cut I don't know. I wasn't there. You could see the clip if you go to just Google Lubavitcher Rebbe CNN, it'll come up the clip. And the interviewer asked the Rebbe, what is your message to the world about Mashiach? And the Rebbe said that Mashiach is coming now. And all that is needed is to add in goodness and kindness. So that very adding in goodness and kindness, the Rebbe is telling the world, that could be all you need to do to express your acceptance of Mashiach. In other words, the Rebbe is saying all that we need to do is accept Mashiach. And the Rebbe is telling CNN to tell the world, add in goodness and kindness. That's what you need to do to bring Mashiach. So when Noahide knows Mashiach's coming, and because Mashiach's coming, she adds, in an extra act of goodness, an extra act of kindness, that could tip the scale and bring the redemption. So clearly, non-Jews are very strong players in the process. And clearly, the Rebbe did not tell CNN, what do you ask me this question for? Mashiach is for the Jews, The Jewish people have work to do. It's got nothing to do with CNN's audience. No, the Rebbe is saying, what is your message to the world? My message to the world is, Mashiach is ready to come now. Add in goodness and kindness, make it happen. So clearly, we all have to work to make it happen. And again, the overarching theme is accept Mashiach. They're here saying, accept Mashiach. Mashiach's coming, accept Mashiach. And how do you express your acceptance of Mashiach? Do an extra act of goodness. This is how I'm saying, God, I believe, and please make it happen. God, I believe you need a little bit more from my end. Fine. I'll do another good deed. Now, you could say it's been a long time from the fall of 1991 to 2024, but this message is the same. But haven't we done lots of acts of goodness and kindness, and haven't we accepted Mashiach, and haven't we, there's many, many, many different instructions the Rebbe has given us to do to bring redemption. Haven't we done all that, for the past, what are we talking about here? 33 some years we've done. But clearly, if we're stuck in a world that expresses a lot of energy of evil, though we know it's all a facade, because we know the core of the world is already Mashiach. Because Baba Rebbe said all the godliness of Mashiach is already here. But I see a lot of stuff on the surface of evil, fighting its last fight and really trying hard to win, though we know it lost. Obviously, we didn't do enough. So we believe, and we do. And if it doesn't come yet, that means we've got to do more. So So we do again. And if it still doesn't come, well, I know it's got to come by now because godliness is cumulative and good is cumulative. And we've definitely done a lot of this stuff for the past 33 years, but it didn't come. The only way I process it is it's so ready and just a little bit more. Like, those, radio, or I don't know, maybe I don't know if they have them in television, but like those things where the thousands caller, the hundredth person that's going to get on the bus, those types of things. So imagine you were caller, I don't know, 999. Well, I didn't win anything. True. But the only way there's a caller number 1,000 is because of the 999 people that called before. So every good addition that every one of us has done from the beginning of time, because godliness is eternal, godliness never goes away. So any piece of godliness that has been done by Jew or non-Jew for 5,785 years is accumulating, and we know it's like, okay, it's just a little bit more, and that will make this happen for the entire world. There's like a metaphor, a story given to explain this, a parable. In the language of a parable is often the language of these parables. There's a king. So there's a king. The king is walking in his garden, and he sees in his garden this huge, ugly, massive tree he never noticed before. He was never in this corner of the royal gardens. He's like, oh my gosh, it's such an ugly, horrible tree destroying my beautiful garden. So right away, gardeners, the king talks, and there you are. Get rid of this tree. Okay, sure, of course. And then he walks here another day and still there. Gardeners, what's this tree here? He said, we tried. It's so thick, so ancient. We can't cut it down. I said, that's ridiculous. I said, we can't. I'll get better gardeners. We can't. He probably got better. Nobody could cut down this tree. So he made a royal edict. And he said, whichever man is successful in chopping down this tree, he's going to get the hand of the princess in marriage. I don't know if he shared with the princess his plan. Wow. Well, there's a lot of people that were trying to chop down that tree. And the strongest men in this country and other countries, they come and they chop and they chop and they chop, and nothing happened. Chop. Nothing happened. And first few days, there was lines of people trying. And then weeks later, there was shorter lines of people trying. And months later, like, nobody bothered to try because they knew it was impossible. And one day, some skinny-looking guy comes. He says, I'm here for the contest. I want to try to chop down that tree. And they're looking at him and they're laughing like, the strongest men in the world have tried to chop down this tree. You're like a little nobody with your little puny axe. He's like, I want to try. Okay. Everyone's allowed to try. Fine. This is a good laugh. Let's see this guy. And this little guy comes. He gives a little, and the whole tree comes tumbling down. I'm like, whoa. Wow. You won the prize. How did you do it? He said, simple. I figured after all these strongest men have tried and still standing, it probably needs just a little bit more, and it'll all come crashing down. So that's what I did. So that parable that I did not make up is really expressive of the concept. We're tiny little midgets, but we're on the shoulders of giants, of 5,785 years worth of merits of serving God, of Jews and Noahide serving God for years and years and years and years, 5,785 years. And it's like the Rebbe sees in a way that I can't see, and I don't know if anyone else can see, but the Rebbe sees, it's it. We're there. We're at the end. So just a little bit more effort, and it'll all happen. So we keep working sincerely and believing in the truth of God's vision, of the Rebbe seeing this, and we try again, and we try again, and we try again, and we know the fact that it hasn't happened just makes us more certain that it's gotta happen. Next question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And I know, Cyril, you and I have talked about this before, but it has been many years. And maybe you talked about this last week. I didn't get to listen to the whole recording. If the answer is listen to last week, please tell me. But how do we identify Moshiach? How do we know for certain who Moshiach is? Because I think a lot of people here grew up believing Moshiach was somebody that it's not. So I think that is a topic that a lot of people will struggle with for sure.
So that specific question I don't think was asked last week, but I did touch on the point you just said, that I think for a lot of Noahides, the concept of Mashiach feels very dangerous. Like, scary. I get stressed. I get tense. I get nervous. I'm uncomfortable with the topic because it just sounds too close to comfort, too JC close to comfort. Not every Noahide. Some Noahides were completely unaffiliated and became Noahides, but the bulk of Noahides that I've met were very devout. Listen, I live in America. They're very devout Christians, Catholics, Protestants, evangelicals, very devout, and then saw the falseness in it. And now hearing about Moshiach, and it's not just an era, it's a man. The word Moshiach means the era, the days of redemption, and it means the person, King Moshiach, the Redeemer. And that sounds like too close to JC and too close of the garbage that was seen through as garbage and that had their parents or ancestors of the world has been duped into believing. And it's like, no, I don't want to go anywhere close to this. But this is very foundational to Judaism. So just touch a little bit on the JC point, because I do think it could be in the heart of many Noah. What's the problem with JC? Because he's not the right guy. Because he's no way, shape, or form has any of the qualifications of Moshiach. How do we know what the qualifications are? Well, Maimonides, who codified all of Jewish law, is actually the only codifier who codifies Moshiach. Meaning, Maimonides is not the only codifier of Jewish law, but he's the most thorough codifier, because he codified all the laws, including the laws that were not relevant to the time of exile. While the other codifiers, there were two other codifiers also in his rough time frame, as we once learned, the Rosh and the Rif, as well as Maimonides, but they didn't touch on any of the laws that have to do with the Messianic era. But Maimonides codified everything. So he lists the qualifications of Mashiach, and JC doesn't fit any of them. He wasn't particularly religious. He didn't return the Jews to God. He's not a direct descendant of Solomon, the son of David. We don't know his ancestry at all, actually. What is the power in JC? I think the power of that warped evil is because it's taking such a powerful truth and distorting it. I'll tell you something that might seem shocking to you, and it actually is shocking. Maimonides writes. Now, most versions of Maimonides do not have this, because Maimonides, like most of the Jewish works, were censored by the Christian world. But in the original Maimonides, Maimonides writes that the reason that the world believes in JC is that they should not forget the concept of Mashiach. Now, they're believing in it wrong Mashiach. That belief and all that Christianity represents has done more harm to the Jewish people than any belief in the world, more harm than Islam ever did. And of course, Islam has caused the murder of many Jews. But still, Maimonides says, there's a power there. There's a power there of reminding the world of Mashiach. So when a Noahide gets concerned, because this sounds too much like JC, they have to say, breathe, and remember that JC is a warped version of truth. Would I not believe, again, obviously Noahide doesn't keep the Sabbath, but do I not believe in the Sabbath because Christians made a Sunday from the Sabbath? Do I not, I don't know, most of lost Christians decide we're irrelevant, so you don't have the problem. Would I not believe in charity because Christians took that as a virtue? No, where they took everything. They took everything. They took Judaism. All the original Christians were Jews, right? They took Judaism and they made an amalgamation of Judaism and the idolatry of those times. They first tried to, if you know the history, which I'm sure you must on some level, the early Christians tried to take their new faith and sell it to the Jews. And the Jews rejected it. There's no way JC was the Messiah. He doesn't fulfill any of the criteria of the Messiah. He wasn't the Messiah. We don't believe any of this stuff. This isn't real. This is garbage. So when they couldn't sell Christianity to the Jews, they went to the pagan world and they made an amalgamation of Jewish concepts and pagan beliefs. And they started selling it to the world. And it was far better than anything the world knew. So they bought it. And what actually happened was here they're proselytizing Christianity to the pagan world. And the pagan world is accepting it. And then the more thinking members of the pagan world, once they're already getting this little taste of Judaism and Christianity, they wanted the real thing. So they actually started going to the source of Christianity, Judaism, and they actually, some of them converted. They wanted to become Jews. They wanted to learn about Judaism. And when the heads of Christianity saw this, they were like, whoa, we've got to make such a wall that no Christian is going to want to find out about Judaism. So that's when they started making as part of Christian doctrine hatred of the Jews, decided they killed the Messiah, even though, of course, the Romans did. But whatever, killer of the Messiah, and whatever else they said about the Jewish people, all the lies and evils that was from then until now. I mean, Nazi Germany spread the same falsehoods that Middle Ages did, medieval times did, that came from the early Christian fathers. And it was deliberate design to make sure that no thoughtful, thinking, philosophically minded Christian would actually look to Judaism. Netanya, you had your hand raised, and I was just going on, so I didn't answer you.
I just remember the question of the rabbi. This was back in 2007 or so in the Philippines. And I went to, I'm not sure if it's a Chabad shul, but I think it's an ortho. Anyways, the first question the rabbi asked me is that, do you believe in Jesus Christ? And then, my answer is kind of embarrassing. Now, fast forward, is that, my answer is that, um, I think he probably lived during that time because again, I was just starting and then I was just married, really well. I don't know about this thing. So now, no, I should have answered that. I don't know, just feel like sharing.
Well, it makes sense that he asked you because maybe it probably was not a Chabad shul. Because a Chabad synagogue, we don't ask questions. We're embracive.
So,
We trust that every person that's coming, they're sincere seekers, and we're happy.
And actually, we're already in Canada at that time, and then I just heard that there's a Chabad house. I read from another article. There's I was like, oh, I didn't know there's a Chabad house.
That's what we call the Chabad centers. They're chabad houses. And
Yeah,
Chabad
right.
should be embracive and shouldn't ask questions. Oh, yes, you would answer the question different today than you did then. Getting back to Danielle's question, so I sort of veered away from her essence question. I was not trying to not answer her. I just was sort of going into the whole background piece of the Noahide and understanding the JC trigger to the tension around Moshiach. So how do we know who Moshiach is? So as I said, Maimonides identified for us. Maimonides explained the criterion. A king, a ruler of the Jewish people, from the house of David, actually not only from the house of David, but a direct descendant from Solomon. From all of David's sons, it has to have a direct line from Solomon, the son of David. Learned in Torah and the commandments just as well as David was, whose mission is to repair the breaches in divine service, who fights the wars of God and is successful, who builds the temple in its place, and gathers the Jewish people back to Israel. Those are the 7 criterion that Maimonides says. When somebody does all 7, you know he's the Redeemer. You could say, wow, by the time you do all 7, the whole world would know he's the Redeemer. We have a temple and all the Jews in Jerusalem. I don't think anyone's going to have any questions on who the Redeemer is. So the truth is, there's 2 stages in the process. And this is legalistic terminology. This is Jewish law. The first stage is what we call I'm saying the Hebrew term because it's a Hebrew term, Becheskas Mashiach, which would translate as the presumed Messiah, the presumed Redeemer, and Mashiach Vadai, the absolute Redeemer. Now we are told by 3 different sources, 3 different early sources. One's called the Steichemet, one's called the Chassam Sofer, and one's called the Bartanura. Steichemet, Chassam Sofer, and Bartanura. That always, all 3 separate, ancient, venerated sources, they all 3 say the same thing, that in every generation, there's always someone around who's a Redeemer. Because, they're not saying because, I'm explaining to you because if there wasn't, what would happen if suddenly we deserve redemption? A baby's going to be born? And then we're going to wait, 20 years, 30 years for him to be of age to redeem the world? So, to avoid that, so to speak, not only for that reason, but to be simplistic, also for that very practical reason, there is always a Redeemer waiting in the wings, the leader of the Jewish people. And when the time comes, if at any point in the cosmic clock we are now ready for the redemption, this is it, we've reached it, God will reveal himself to that person, the potential Redeemer, and send him. So there's always someone in the world who's Becheskas Mashiach, the presumed Messiah. And if he actually completes the job, he's the Mashiach Vadai, the absolute Messiah. So that means the presumed Messiah could live and then it didn't happen, so he passes away and someone else is a presumed Messiah. And then if it didn't happen, obviously from the beginning of time until now, there's always been the presumed Messiah. And definitely from the leader of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe, and down, obviously we know it's that line. And just waiting for God to give him the green light. Actually, on a more spiritual way to understand this, because we're talking sort of Jewish law, but Jewish law and Jewish spirit are one. So from the spiritual perspective, what I was saying until now was legalistic, but from the spiritual perspective, there's one soul of the leader of Jewry. It's the soul of Moses. And from the moment of Moses' life until now, that soul has always been in the leader of the generation. So from Moses to Joshua, down, 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 all the years, there always was that potential Mashiach soul, that leader of the Jewish people's soul, that was always within the body of the current leader of the generation. And if the redemption had happened then, he would have been revealed as King Messiah, King Moshiach. But if it didn't happen, then that soul with the energy of leader of the generation, of Mashiach of the generation, passes to the next one. So therefore, we have a responsibility, according to Maimonides, to identify this leader of the generation, this Mashiach of the generation. And according to what the Rebbe said, actually most specifically yesterday in Chayei Sarah, when the only job left is to accept Mashiach Tzidkeinu, our only job is to accept Mashiach, personally, him, so that he can fulfill his mission and redeem the Jewish people, we for sure need to do this. So again, the 5 criterion that we could identify even before the whole world can see him with the ingathering of the Jewish people and building of the temple is a king. A king. What Jew is wearing a crown? They're wearing hats. King meaning someone that people listen to as a king. People accept authority absolutely as a king. Direct descendant of all the way back to Solomon, the son of David. Completely versed, completely perfect and immersed in Torah and the commandments. Who is working his emphasis, because obviously a person can be completely great, but be in a synagogue somewhere and learning Torah day and night, and that's amazing, that's great, and that's beautiful. But that's not the energy of the Messiah. The Messiah is working to bring the world to fix the breaches in divine service. He will fix the breaches in divine service. That's how Maimonides expresses it. And who's fighting God's wars. So he can't be in his synagogue, in his study hall, learning Torah day and night, which is beautiful, which is amazing, which is godly, but it's not the Messiah. So if you find someone with those 5 criterion, you believe he's the Messiah. There's more than one candidate, fine. We'll see. But we need to find someone. So for me, it's very obvious based on many things. I'm just being very simple and going legalistically with the Maimonides, that there's Lubavitcher Rebbe. For sure, king. For sure, he has probably more than any Jewish leader. Thousands and thousands of people that do absolutely anything he tells them to. He is a direct descendant of Solomon, the son of David. Absolutely versed in all of Torah and the commandments. Totally devoted his whole leadership to fixing the breaches in divine service more than anyone we can think of in modern times, or probably anyone in all times. I can't think of any Jewish leader that ever worked and has advanced a reach, obviously because of the modern world. If I compare him to Mordechai. Mordechai was a leader of the Jewish people, but he didn't have the same army of followers because the world was a different place. So he was clearly, spiritually, the leader of world Jewry, no question. Very few people we could point a finger and have no question who's the leader of world Jewry. Mordechai was one of those. But the Rebbe in the 21st century was able to, in a very obvious way, reach the entire world. Meaning, 200 years ago, the first Rebbe of Chabad, Reb Shneur Zalman Liadi, he was the Mashiach of his times. He was the leader of world Jewry. But I could not ever prove to you that he was influencing Jews in France. If any Jews had got to America by that time, I can't show it to you. It's belief, it's faith. But in our times, it's on the surface. So more than any Jewish leader ever, the Rebbe devoted himself to really reaching all the cracks in divine service and trying to fix them. And with his army of emissaries, really, in a very physical way, trying to reach the world and correct the breaches in divine service and fighting God's wars. Now, obviously, the Rebbe fought many wars for God. The wars the Rebbe has identified as God's wars, the war against communism. The Rebbe said in the 60s that when you see the fall of communism, know it's Moshiach winning his war. And when communism fell, it was sort of clear what the Rebbe meant, because it fell in such a miraculous way, like, it just crumbled. It was just gone. Like, what happened? Oh, right, that was Moshiach fighting his battle and winning. There were other battles the Rebbe identified as the wars of God, like in Israel, fighting for the land, fighting for the purity of the Jewish people. Those were wars of God. So that's why, for many people, it seems to us very obvious it's the Lubavitcher Rebbe. But if someone would find someone else and say, I have a different candidate and he fulfills all 5 requirements, I'd be like, go for it. Go. I would never take away anyone's belief, as long as he fulfills the commandments, this criterion. So if you look at the criterion, you understand why this wasn't JC at all. Like, he was never a king. He never had whatever they rewrite, in their New Testaments. But no, he did not have these myriads of followers that absolutely were obeying him. He eschewed any paternal lineage, so he definitely wasn't a direct descendant of Solomon, the son of David. He was not versed in Torah or particularly religious in the commandments at all. Unfortunately, obviously the opposite. Basically threw them all off and told people to, which is why the Jews rejected him, why the Jews knew he was false. Because if he's saying don't follow the commandments, obviously he's not a representative of God. He did not fix the breaches in divine service. He created tremendous breaches in divine service, and he did not fight God's wars. He rebelled against God. So that's why there's nothing here that has anything to do with JC, but would be always the criterion we're supposed to look at to identify who Moshiach is. And I have a pamphlet, like a little book in my house, collection of, throughout the ages, different great Jews, identifying other great Jews as Moshiach, meaning basically looking at the Jews of their time and seeing a person who really embodied Moshiach. According to Maimonides, our original source of all this, Maimonides says that David was the Messiah of his times. Obviously, they didn't have a complete redemption then, but he was the first Mashiach. And the final or ultimate Mashiach will be at the end of time.
Wasn't there supposed to be a Mashiach in every generation?
There is a Mashiach in every generation. There is. That's what I'm saying. In every generation, there's a Mashiach. And if at any point the redemption was going to come, that person will be the Redeemer. But if the redemption doesn't come, then that person is not the Redeemer, not because he's not worthy, but because redemption doesn't come. Like a very famous example is Bar Kokhba, who was shortly after the time of the destruction of the Second Temple. He was the Mashiach of his times. And it almost came, but it didn't because the Jews messed up. So he died. But he was the Redeemer, but the redemption didn't come. So he's not, the eternal Mashiach of God because the redemption didn't come, not from his lack, but from the people's lack at that time. So like Moses, like Joshua, like Rashi, like Maimonides, like Bar Kokhba, like the first Rebbe of Chabad, and the second, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the sixth, they were all the Mashiach of their times. They all should have been Mashiach. A famous biblical commentary, the Or HaChaim, he said he was a Mashiach of his times. We were discussing last week, right? How 4 different heads of bodies of study in Babylonia all said they were the Mashiach of their times. So there's always a Mashiach, and if the redemption does not come when that person passes away, the soul of Mashiach goes to the next Redeemer who's alive to carry on the torch, to continue the leadership until we come to the ultimate redemption, when then whoever is the Messiah at that time would be the Messiah eternally. But if at any point in history it happened before, then that person, because again, it's not a like, I want it. People that are that great and that holy, what they want is God's will fulfilled. It's not like my ego trip. I want to be the King Messiah and lead the world forever. No, I want God's will fulfilled. So if it happens during my time, I'm blessed to be God's emissary. And if it doesn't happen during my time, the soul passes on to the next person and he's blessed to be God's emissary. The world was created with a 7,000-year mandate. That was how God created the world. As each day of creation, the world was created in 7 days, and each day of creation created a millennium. So 7 days of creation, each day creates a millennium, you have 7,000 years for a world. The first 2,000 years are called the 2,000 years of chaos. Mashiach could not have come then. Be impossible. There was no potential Messiah waiting in the wings because Mashiach couldn't come then. The next 2,000 years are called the 2,000 years of Torah, as the Torah was given to the world in the year 2448. Once the Torah was given, there's potential for Mashiach to come, but not really. It's like the world isn't really ready. Like, sort of like, if you make something and you're in a rush, so you take the noodles out and they're a little hard and chewy, but you could tell your family, yeah, it tastes so good. Hard, chewy noodles, delicious. No, they're not raw. They're not eating them raw from the box, but they're not completely cooked. Piece of meat, we could pretend it was done, but it needs an hour or two more. So that was like the state of Messiah in the third and fourth millennium. The first two millenniums, the first 2,000 years of creation, impossible. No spiritual way redemption could have come then. The second set of 2,000 years, from the year 2000 to 4000, Mashiach could come, but it's not going to be such a good Mashiach. So not really. From the year 4000, we are now at the point in the cosmic clock when Mashiach can come. No problem. We can have the complete revelation of redemption from the year 4000. We are now in the year 5785. So we are toward the end of the sixth millennium. Now Moshiach has to come before the year 6000, because the final millennium, the seventh millennium, from the year 6000 to the year 7000, is a millennium of redemption. So we already have to actually be in the second stage of redemption by the year 6000, because the year 6000, beginning the millennium of redemption, is already stage 2 in the redemption. So stage 1 has to happen some point before the year 6000. It could have happened any time from the year 4000 up until like just before the year 6000. Well, you can see we haven't been doing a stellar job because we're up to the year 5785. You can also see that in the cosmic clock, we have less than 250 years left. Not that any of us want to wait 250 years. We could look at the world and say, oh, the world is falling apart, falling apart, falling apart, going down, 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 down. But actually, from a godly perspective, since godliness is eternal and it never tarnishes, it never fades, it never gets garbaged. So any good that's been done since the beginning of time until now, for 5,785 years, is all in this world, affecting this world. So there's more. It could look like the world is, but actually that's not true at all. Actually, there's more and more and more godliness than there ever was. And we're like, almost now. But again, for the cosmic clock, we're really late in the game. We're really late in the game. So is there any advantage in being late in the game? Well, I don't know if you call it late, but there is, I'll tell you another parable, which I didn't make up either, but sort of expresses this concept. So it's the high holidays. It's Rosh Hashanah. And there's a simple peasant Jew that comes to synagogue. He probably never goes to synagogue, but Rosh Hashanah, he comes to synagogue. Maybe he lives far from the synagogue. Maybe he's on a farm somewhere, but he comes to synagogue. So he knows nothing about synagogue. I don't know if he could barely read Hebrew. It's a long day. It's a lot of prayers. And the congregation starts singing a really sad tune. Probably some very soulful words of the prayers. Now, he doesn't understand the prayers at all. And he's a very simple person. So he hears a congregation singing this really sad melody. And he's like, oh, yeah, we're all so hungry. My wife made such good meat. We're going to have such a great meal. We never eat meat, but it's Rosh Hashanah. She made a delicious roast. I'm so hungry. Yeah, we're all so hungry. That's why we're singing this sad tune as we're stuck in synagogue. We really would like to be home eating. Then the congregation starts singing a really happy tune. And he's like, wait, why are we all so happy now? Oh, I get it. Because the longer the meat cooks, the better it tastes. So yeah, actually, it's great that I'm in synagogue. We're so happy we're in synagogue because we know the meat is cooking longer and longer. It's going to be so good. And then the congregation starts singing a sad song. Wait, why are we sad again? Oh, because we're hungry. We just want to eat already. And then a happy song. Oh, but the meat's going to be better. And it goes back and forth. And finally, he gets just so frustrated when they're in the middle of singing, for round number one, a happy song. He just calls out, I don't care. I don't care how good it's going to taste. I just want to eat it now. And that parable is sort of expressing this point, that it's been 5,785 years. And as the Jewish scholars, as Torah scholars understand it, from the year 4000, Mashiach could have come. But obviously, if it comes in 4010 or 4100 or 4200 or 4300, well, obviously there's more and more and more merit. And obviously more and more merit creates a better and better and better and better and better and better redemption. Obviously, There are things we can only do before the redemption happens. I mean, people can only convert before redemption. Nobody can convert once redemption happens. People can only conquer and vanquish evil during redemption. There's no vanquishing of evil by redemption. There is no evil by redemption. People can only jump in terms of their relationship to God before redemption. Once redemption happens, no one can jump. We'll all be progressing, at a steady rate, but no jumping. No jumping to the top of your ladder. No jumping over anyone else's head. There's no jumping at all by redemption. There's no concept of overcoming the evil, and all that stuff does not exist, because none of that exists by redemption. So there are certain ways we can give to God and improve ourselves spiritually that can only happen now. The fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, whose birthday was this past week, actually said that when the redemption comes, wir wollen banken für the Gottes Tag, which means we will long for the days of exile. We'll long for exile. What are we going to miss? Which part of the pain and suffering and traumas are we going to want back? We're not going to want any of it back. But we're going to recognize then what we could have accomplished. Because all of the ability to accomplish is only now. Once redemption comes, there's no challenge, there's no conflict, there's no confusion, it's all clear, and it's all service of God, and therefore, in a sense, it doesn't have the power and the passion's the wrong word. It doesn't have the power, it doesn't have the special beauty of someone like going through the trenches, going through the mud, and choosing God. Well, there'll be no choice but God. Obviously, the whole world's going to serve God. It's going to be beautiful. It will be beautiful. It will be amazing. Trust me. I'll be very happy to get to that point. But there is something we can accomplish now that we won't be able to accomplish then. So you could say that every day, every hour, every minute that we're still in this state, and it's been 5,785 years, which is about 1,785 years too long for sure. Yes, there's enormous good we're doing now that we will not be able to do then. Like the meat is getting better and better and better and better. And we reach a point of saying, who cares? We don't care, God. It's great. And if you had us in exile for another day, it'll get even better. We're done. It's beautiful enough. It's amazing. We give up all the advantages of exile. Like, we don't care. We just want redemption now. Wow. All right. We are over time. I knew once you get on a topic like this, how could you ever end that exactly after an hour? Dixie, did you have something you wanted to add?
I just wanted to say, you explained to me why they say nobody can convert after Mashiach comes. Now I understand.
That is why. Because once Moshiach comes, the whole world would just want to convert.
Yeah.
And it would be like, no, that's not the point. To convert means
Makes sense.
all the concealments, all the difficulties and challenges, and still you're choosing to take on that extra yoke of God, that very huge extra yoke of being a Jew. So it only has value and the possibility now. And when Mashiach comes, no concept of conversion. Absolutely no concept. So now we could say Judaism is an open club for anyone that really wants it. But when Mashiach comes, no. But the whole world will serve God, and the majority of the world will be Noahides, 8 billion of them, and the entire world. Anyone today, doesn't make a difference if they're, God knows what, Hamas and Hezbollah and all the evil. That all the evil will be gone. All the evil will be gone, and every single human being will only want to connect to God, because that's all that has value. That is all that's real. That's all that's meaningful. And every single human being in the entire world will recognize that and will want it. So I don't think it's unfathomable to me to imagine that people in the world would feel, oh, I'm so gypped. I should have converted. I don't think so, because that doesn't seem to me a very positive messianic era for people to feel like, no. So I again, this is just my belief system, but I can't prove it to you. But I do believe that every human being will be wanting God, will be connecting to God. Whatever you did before redemption will put you so much more ahead in connecting to God. But even someone who did nothing will spend the rest of his life connecting to God and will feel very full and satiated and joyous from that relationship to God. I don't think people be walking around feeling gypped. I think people be walking around excited about the relationship to God and wanting more and more and more in the relationship to God, but not feeling bad that they don't have someone else's relationship to God.